Hello, thank you all for coming together this evening. Well, for me, it's early morning in California. I'm so grateful, and it gives me so much hope when I can gather with lovely, well intentioned people who care about the earth and about each other and really want to create the world that supports us all and also heals the earth. And so, thank you. Thank you for coming together. So I'm going to share my screen because, of course, being a professor, I have a PowerPoint. But it really helps me talk about sort of the things I want to talk about, but also hopefully it'll help you follow along. So let me see if I can share my screen. Okay, there it is. Then just 1 second, I'm going to make it bigger. And I'm going to go into presentation mode. Okay, so I want to start off by thanking Roger Katsu for bringing us together and inviting me. I was so thrilled to have a learned person from Turkey who had actually read my book reach out to me. I can't tell you how thrilling that was. I have one good friend whose family is in Turkey, but she's a professor in the US. And other than that, I don't really know people in Turkey who might have read my book or even care about Buddhist economics. So thank you. Thank you for bringing us together. Now, I want to talk about how to live a meaningful life during this time of multiple crises. Already, we have been suffering from growing inequality globally and in our own countries for the last 4 decades. And we've also had a lot of human rights problems in the US. It's especially a problem in racial injustice. And we also have been living with the existential crisis of all times, the climate emergency, so that our use of fossil fuel energy is literally killing the planet and our way of life here. And then on top of that, all of a sudden, we have a global pandemic that's caused an economic meltdown. And so we were already dealing with inequality and climate crisis. And now we're dealing with the pandemic. And actually, I think it's giving us a time, it's certainly giving me a chance to step back and actually think about life in a deeper, more meaningful way. Because let's face it, before the pandemic, we were all, I think, overly busy and we're trying to do too much. And now sometimes we're sick of the social isolation. I know I'm really tired of Zoom, except thank you, Zoom, for bringing us together. Without Zoom, I would never have been able to do this with you. So there is a minor upside, but mainly I hope that we can see the positive things that we are getting during this period where life has really slowed down. We've all entailed suffering in different ways, depending upon our circumstances. But it gave me a chance also to deepen my own thinking about what I teach and do research in at Berkeley called Buddhist economics. Now, Buddhist economics only means actually being aware of ecology, being aware of suffering, and caring about things other than just materialism. So let me tell you, and also caring about the human spirit. So there are lots of different ways one can call it or name it. It doesn't have to be called Buddhist economics. There are other names, but mainly it's not free market economics. So that's the big deal, is that if you accept interdependence, where people are interdependent with each other and with nature, this is a critical assumption. The minute you assume that, then in fact your well-being and my well-being are tied together. And the pandemic has certainly made that really obvious. How if you're sick, hey, I can get sick. And then we're interdependent with nature. And the climate emergency is the Arctic melts. And as California has wildfires, lots of wildfires around the world, as we have sea level rise, we see the problems with nature and the earth, and that's impacting people around the world. So all of a sudden, the importance of interdependence is really obvious, but it totally changes the way you think about the economy. And we'll be coming back to that a lot. That interdependence is one of the four laws of ecology. So Buddha taught interdependence, and almost all spiritual leaders do. That it turned out to be actually a scientific principle, where, as Barry Commoner, one of the founders of ecology, wrote, everything is connected to everything else. There's one ecosphere for all living organisms, and one affects all. So yesterday, I just happened to be listening to a podcast while I was doing some exercises. Ooh. The podcast, fortunately, was great. The exercises weren't so much fun. But this podcast was about the secret life of forest, and what some very bright, holistic, and creative researchers learned is that trees don't just stand out there alone in the forest, but they actually are interconnected underground through a whole fungal and microbe network. And they actually share nutrients, they signal to each other, they do all kinds of things as a community. And I love that because it made it real clear how interdependence is everywhere. And it's a wonderful podcast. I got it through the New York Times. If you have a chance, it'll inspire you. Then the other assumption that's very important is impermanence. Now, we all know everything changes, but usually we think about change in a positive way. Sometimes, life has ups and downs, but we often welcome change. Oh, a new job. Oh, I'm getting married. I'm having a baby. I got promoted. Uh, I just bought a house, or new things happen. And we see great things happening to our friends. And so we usually aren't that scared of change, but the pandemic has really caused an uncertainty that's quite negative. And we are so fearful of watching people we love and people all around us get sick, people die, people lose their jobs, people are food insecure, people are fearful of losing their homes, their apartments. It's a time of change that's actually not just an up and down, but it's a time of change that is really fearful for many people because of the uncertainty. And then the third assumption is actually that people, because of interdependence and human nature, people actually are compassionate and altruistic. And people like and want to reduce suffering locally in their communities or families, but also globally. And so those are the three main assumptions of Buddhist economics, or basically holistic economics of any kind. So let me just quickly remind you, I'm sure you already are very aware that free market economics is turned on its head when you assume altruism and impermanence and compassion, because free market economics is based upon three beliefs: that more is better, materialism is it, consumption is it. It's also based upon the fact that economists, many of them, not all of them anymore, they think people are selfish and also rational. And they also, therefore, think the only goal of the economy is to maximize income. Forget inequality. Forget the impact on the earth. Forget the harm that the economy might be doing. The goal is to maximize income. But Buddhist economics, with its interdependence and impermanence and compassion, has the goal to provide the well-being for all people in a sustainable world. And so the well-being of the body and the mind and the human spirit is important, but it's not determined by consumption. And it's not even determined by outside events, not from a Buddhist viewpoint. So this takes us to the question, hey, what creates happiness? Well, one of the reasons, and I love the introduction, thank you for my introduction, because one of the reasons that I talk about caring for others is that the neurosurgeons have taught us that actually caring and helping others makes us happy. And also caring for the planet, enjoying nature makes us happy. So I love the fact that finally the neuroscientists went out and proved, they did imaging, they did all kinds of tests, the psychologists joined in. And they found out that actually helping others makes you happy. Enjoying nature makes you happy. Now, Aristotle had taught us, he called it eudaimonic happiness that comes from helping others and good relations. And also, very important to Aristotle was you're contributing to your community. And we're going to come back to that because for me, that's also a critical part of finding a meaningful life today. Now, Buddhism understands, and one of the central points is that everyone wants to be happy. All of us share that. But happiness is really talks about having inner peace, having a balanced life, and feeling good within yourself. And so happiness comes from within, or we even call it inner wealth, and not from outer wealth or consumption. Because in fact, the grasping and the whole idea of maximizing consumption will actually make you suffer. So that's like a critical difference between Buddhist economics and free market economics. In one, the whole goal is to grasp and stay on the materialistic treadmill. And from a Buddhist viewpoint, that's going to make you suffer. So you can see that they're in opposition to each other. But let's get back to this whole idea. Are people altruistic or selfish? Now, you know what? You don't have to really fret about that or tie yourself in knots trying to answer it. Are people interdependent or only individualistic? Because actually, people are both. And that's the other thing we learn from psychologists and from the neuroscientists that everybody is altruistic in some way, even if they're also self-regarding, and you can do both. And in fact, in Buddhism, it's important that you care for yourself and that you care for your family. It's really important that you like yourself and you feel good about and accepting of who you are, because you want to be compassionate with yourself, and that actually is one step towards learning to be compassionate for everyone around you. Now, altruism, and Ricard does a great book on this called Altruism. Um, but it's 500 pages because his French background, I guess you have to write 500 pages. But it's a beautiful book, and he explains how altruism is unconditional caring about others with no ulterior motive, and why we know that people, in fact, are altruistic, even if they are self regarding. And I just want to say, you'll see biologists and others really fighting over, is it biological evolution where people are selfish and mean and fight each other, or is cultural evolution important in terms of creating the social norms and the society where people, in fact, cooperate and care for each other? But let me just point out that cultural evolution actually happens very quickly, and biological evolution takes a really long time. And in fact, unfortunately, cultural evolution is not in one direction, as we've seen. So that in the US and actually other countries, including those represented here today, we've seen a degradation of our culture going. In the US under Obama, people were much more caring and nice, and race was a much more obvious issue with people caring about racial injustice and people not trying to aggressively compete with each other. But then Trump got elected, and all of a sudden, even on my campus with my students, I was shocked at how much more aggressive people got and how much more competitive and how much less time that they took to actually care and have empathy. So, one of the things I want to remind you about is, in fact, though, this whole idea of caring for others with happiness. And one of the books that I pick up often to read is The Way of the Bodhisattva, which is actually in verse. So it's quite nice to just open it up anywhere by Shanti Deva. It's a really important book about sort of the way to live a mindful, ethical, meaningful life. And this is one quote from the book that is very meaningful to me. All the suffering there is in this world arises from wishing ourselves to be happy. All the happiness there is in this world arises from wishing others to be happy. So reflect upon that because the pandemic has been a time for reflection and asking what's important to me. And when my students, who all of them are going through some stressful times, and they'll start fretting and they'll start worrying, and I'll just say, let's just stop right now. Let's have some moment of silence. And then I want you to start thinking about what's important to you. Take some walks outside. Jot down your ideas. What is important to me? And so, one of the things that I really appreciate also is that Roger Coxu shared with you a couple of passages from my book that are related to this. Um, he said that for many people, creating a meaningful life, oh, he sent you this, I'm sorry, and I hope you had a chance to think about it. For many people, creating a meaningful life requires that they work fewer hours and balance their work and family activities and obligation. This takes serious thought and brainstorming with people at work and at home. Focus on well being rather than income. Figure out how much control you have over your work hours and how much you want or need to work. As we spend less time at work, we can spend more time caring for others, helping our communities, working in the garden and on home projects, and being creative, as well as hanging out with friends and enjoying life. And one of the things that quickly points out, I hope, is the idea of, oh, how much control do I have over my work life and my hours? How much can I restructure my life to be more balanced and to do the things and have time to do the things that are important to me? And in fact, we don't have nearly as much control over our lives usually as we'd like to have. And that's actually true of our economies and our societies. So that's one of the reasons that we need to step back and ask, okay, what does it take to create a meaningful life? How can we have an economy and a society that supports all of us being able to reach our full potential and being able to live with awareness and being able to do the things that are important to us? Um, so that takes us to asking what creates a meaningful life. Um, and inter- just remember the whole idea of interdependence. And it's like we need to come together to work with each other to create the society and the economy that we want and we need. And a great deal of that is supporting ourselves, having a life that supports ourselves, but also we really do need to be aware of our unity with nature and to realize how much we need to heal nature at this point. So I also liked that you got the other passage from my book about don't confuse being hyper connected on social media with being interconnected in human spirit. Put down your iPhone. Look for ways to connect with the people around you, families, friends, and strangers. When you're unhappy with because of all the demands on your life, help someone you know. Think about what's important to you, what you really care about. Let the other things fall off your to-do list. And I remind myself of that often. But that's where the pandemic came in. Now I really miss seeing and hugging my friends, even seeing strangers and talking with them. I really miss my students and my colleagues. I miss being around people in person and hugging and talking and interacting without fear of getting sick. So now I can't wait to get off the internet and be around people in person. And my guess is you feel that way too. So let's just quickly ask the question, because I get to ask this all the time. Just a second. This all sounds great, but is such an economy possible? And so I went and set up a research project with my students at Berkeley, and we asked, what are the policies that would create an economy like a Buddhist economy that we'll just call it a sustainable shared prosperity economy? And so we created a sustainable shared prosperity policy index, where we went out and collected data on known policies that are already being practiced that reduce inequality and provides economic security and opportunity for everyone. We also looked at the policies that create the low carbon economies that we need, with carbon-free energy, regenerative agriculture, clean water. And then we also realized that the UN Millennium Development Goals had already demonstrated to us how to reduce global hunger and poverty. So we know these policies. So we set up the index and, whoops, let's see, whoops. There it is. Sorry for the glitch. And it has three pillars: sustainability, structuring markets, and providing public goods and services. And I won't take you through it because that would take way too long. That's a different lecture. But basically, the European countries do quite well. Sweden, Denmark, Norway, France, Germany, Italy are in the top 10. And you can't see it. Let's see. Can you see? US ranks 37 and Turkey ranks 45. So the US doesn't rank well at all, and Turkey also has a way to go. But that gets us back to this whole idea of materialism and what does create well-being and provides ways of living that people really can enjoy and feel good about themselves and others and their lives, and live with some awareness. And how do we care for our human spirit? So basically, we've got to move off of our materialistic treadmill. We really need to end invidious comparisons and conspicuous consumption. Thank you, Bevelin. And a lot of that is being driven by the enormous inequality we have within our countries and globally across countries. We really do need to transfer income from the rich to people in need. And then societal well being goes up and the focus on materialism goes down. So consume less, live with nature, buy only what you need. I'll just say that the UN has already told us how much CO2 equivalent tons we can emit per year by 2050 and not overheat the planet above 1.5 degrees. To stay within the Paris goal, we can only have 2.1 tons of CO2 equivalent per person per year. The US right now, the average is 16.4. In the EU, the average is much better, but it's still 6.7. It's still over 3 times what we can have. And in Turkey, even the average is a little above the two. Turkey is about 3 tons per person. So it's slightly above. But let me tell you, if you just did this, a lot of this is driven by the inequality where the rich people really emit a lot of carbon compared to the less. So you can see in the US, even though the average is 16 tons per person, if you look at just the median person or the typical person, they only emit half of that. And so that's actually true across countries. So Turkey's typical consumption per person would be below 2.1. So let's go back to ask, how can we use the pandemic as a teaching time, as a time that we can learn about caring and taking the time to care for each other and also take action. So however you can safely help your neighbors and community, I know you're doing that. I see it all around me. I'm just so astonished at the kindness of people, with people they know, but also with strangers, the people they don't know. And I know one small thing I do that gives me a huge amount of pleasure is that I always go to my local farmers market on Friday morning. And when the pandemic hit, they were really struggling. People quit going. And I looked at my husband, I said, we got to support the farmers, but we can only eat so much produce. And we looked at each other and said, let's just buy a ton of produce and give it away. So we did. We started buying a lot of produce because they grow the most beautiful vegetables and fruit and bring them to us and sell them to us. It's really such a treat and a gift. And then we put it in bags and take it around to especially the elderly and the infirmed people in our neighborhoods. And they are just so happy. I mean, they're so grateful. It's like, what a win-win for all of us. And it's just this one small thing that I realized how much I look forward to Fridays now, because I know one way that I can make people's lives better that are around me, people that I know and love in my neighborhood. But then the other thing we have to do is, even if it's on Zoom, which it is but when the pandemic is over, we have vaccinations, then we're off the sofa, we're out the door, and I work politically in California. And the point is you can find something in your neighborhood, your city, your region, your even national, where you work on a problem that you care deeply about that really is going to help stop the climate emergency, mitigate it, and hopefully start healing the earth in some way. And you, once you realize that you want to do that, and many of you probably already are, and thank you for whatever you're doing. I work with 350 Bay Area. That's our local 350 group. We work on reducing fossil fuel emissions and the use of fossil fuel in California. And we work hard, we work together. And the reason it's so important to work together is then you really have power. So there's no way in the world that we could reduce the production and the use of oil and gas in California without working together with environmental groups around the state, because big oil has a lot of money and they use it to fight us. Also, they fight dirty. They lie. They do all kinds of things to fight us because they know that they're on the wrong side of history, but they're still making a lot of money, and they like making money. So as a group, we have more power, and we also have each other's back. I don't think I could do it without being in a group of people. And also, what I realize in a group of people, I just have one skill. I'm an economist. Okay, that's what I do. But what would that help? But when I'm in there with lawyers and health experts and people who know how to make signs and people who know how to communicate on social media or to the press, or people who know how to just drive you up to Sacramento. Everybody has a skill or something they can offer to do. And together we are so powerful. I love it. I mean, we lose a lot, but that's okay. Then we can pat each other on the back and get ready for the next fight. But we also win a lot, and then we can celebrate. So I want you to remember that you can, of course, continue your individual actions. The way you live individually is, of course, very important for how you're feeling, but that your collective actions are really important. And in my book, I also talk a lot about how you can take collective action, even at work, if you're trying to create some changes at work. The main thing is to always team up with other people, because alone there's not nearly as much as we can do when we get together with other people who share our interest and really want to create change. So let me just say, of course, we want to eat mindfully, eat plant-based as much as we can. We want to reduce our materialism. We only want to buy what we need. We don't want to throw things in the landfill. We want to reduce use of energy at home. California's got a pretty good climate, so we don't get too hot or too cold usually. But when it gets cold here, well, to be honest, we just have a lot of blankets and sweatshirts and jackets that we put on or we loan to our friends who are visiting when we have visitors again. But there are lots of ways that you can save water. But I just think once you're mindfully aware of how you're using natural resources like water or fossil fuels or whatever, that you'll know how to change it so that you're using and respectfully thanking the earth. And that's one more thing that comes up is that, well, I think one of the reasons that it's important to say grace, I learned from Thich Nhat Hanh, because I didn't used to say grace until I read one of his passages where he said, you know, when you're having your cup of tea or your slice of bread, stop and thank all the people who made that possible for you. But also thank nature. So you start with nature, and then you go through and you thank the people who planted the plants to make the tea or the bread, and the people who harvest it. He takes it on through and he says, and that's your grace. Your grace is just thanking all the people who brought you your cup of tea. And that's a wonderful way of thinking about gratitude for me. That take action. So I looked up some environmental groups in Turkey and I shared them with Roger Koksu, and he said, "Oh, say cool, the third one on the list. I've worked with say cool planting trees." And that was when I found the Forest podcast so wonderful about the importance of trees and how they themselves protect and help each other. But I listed just three environmental groups that are pretty well known in Turkey in case you want to check them out to see if there's something that would inspire you to take some action. So you can see that Thich Nhat Hanh is one of the people that I look to for teaching me about the earth and caring for the earth as well as each other. Because what I have learned as a Buddhist and as an economist, that if we want to heal earth, we're simultaneously healing ourselves, because how healthy earth is and how earth is doing is also how healthy I'll be doing, because the interdependence is really powerful. So to heal ourselves, we're also healing earth, and it goes together in a cycle. Thich Nhat Hanh tells us our collective compassion, mindfulness, and concentration nourishes us, but it also can help to reestablish the Earth's equilibrium and restore balance. Together, we can bring about real transformation for ourselves and for the world. So, for me, the Earth has been out of balance for quite some time. And one of the reasons I started studying and writing and thinking about and teaching Buddhist economics was, how can we restore balance in a world that's so out of balance with inequality, injustice, with the climate emergency, and now even the pandemic and the economic meltdown. So let me return to an underlying theme that I hope you caught, which is courage. To create the change we want, to live the lives we want, all these things, to stand up to big oil takes a huge amount of courage. So I remind myself of this often when I'm feeling not very courageous. I remind myself, be a fearless warrior. In Buddhism, a fearless warrior is someone who goes out and really helps other people and lives mindfully with awareness. And wherever they go, they reduce suffering and try and heal. So I remind myself courage. And courage basically also sometimes just to get off the sofa and get out the house and go create the change we need. Because I always feel better when I do something that is helping other people or taking action to stop destroying the earth. So remember that to embrace and practice Buddhist economics, you need courage, courage to change, courage to protect the environment, courage to promote justice, and perhaps most important of all, courage to live with joy. We must never forget that we want to live with joy and enjoy life, every moment of this precious life that we have. So let me just end by just bringing this all together to talk about, we actually need political will. Each and every country represented, we need political will along with the courage to take action together. And we need to take the action now if we want to stop overheating and killing the planet. And we need to remember that we're taking action for people and the planet, but also for future generations. And that by caring for people on the planet, we're actually caring for ourselves and the people we love. Now, this is not a one time action. We're talking about a process, and it's a lifetime commitment. And that's actually the beauties of it. It's not that there's a certain end point. There's no end point. It's a way of living. It's a way of coming together. It's a way of creating the lives and the economy and the society that cares for us, cares for all people, and cares for the planet. And so let me just say I'd like to close by thanking you for being here and asking you, may we continue the journey together. So thank you so much for your patience and for your caring.